The winds of Cathara 9 howled like wounded beasts, tearing through the crystalline forests with a fury that could strip flesh from bone. Marin Hale's lantern flickered once, twice, then died, swallowed by the violet storm that had descended without warning from the planet's turbulent atmosphere. She stood motionless for a moment, her environmental suit's indicators flashing urgent warnings across her visor. Temperature dropping. Visibility 0. Recommended action: seek immediate shelter. But shelter was 3 kilometers behind her, back at the research outpost, and the cubs were somewhere ahead, lost in this maelstrom. "Sivran," she whispered into her comm, knowing the range was useless in this interference. The expedition had been routine, a biological survey of Cathara 9's indigenous fauna. The Kithari, as they designated the species, were hexapedal mammals with luminescent fur patterns, remarkably intelligent, and recently declared endangered. The 3 cubs under Marin's care had been orphaned by a rockslide, and she'd spent 6 months earning their trust, learning their language of chirps and thrums. Then the storm hit. The other researchers had made it back. Marin had been conducting behavioral observations in the northern grove when the atmospheric pressure plummeted. She'd gathered the cubs, Sivran, Terrell, and Kosha, and begun the trek back. But the wind had torn Sivran from the group, and when she'd turned to retrieve him, the other 2 had bolted in panic. Now they were scattered, and her lantern was dead. Humans, Marin had learned in her xenobiology training, were considered average by galactic standards. Not the strongest, the Chromath could lift 10 times their weight. Not the fastest, the Valerie moved in blurs. Not the most intelligent, the Archon Collective processed information at quantum speeds. Average. But there was something her instructors never mentioned in those lectures. Something that didn't appear in the comparative physiology charts or the interspecies capability matrices. Humans didn't quit. Marin pressed forward, her boots crunching through the accumulating crystal snow. The storm screamed around her, but she focused on her breathing, on the rhythm of her steps. Her suit's heating system struggled against the cold, but she'd survived worse. She'd grown up in the Canadian Arctic, back on Earth, before the expansion. She knew cold. She knew storms. Then she heard a sound so faint she almost missed it beneath the wind's roar. A tiny, tremulous chirp. Sivran. The cub was the smallest of the 3, barely past infancy. His luminescent patterns were still developing, which meant he'd be nearly impossible to track visually. But his vocalizations, though weak, carried a distinct harmonic signature that Marin had memorized during countless feeding sessions. She adjusted her trajectory, following the sound. Her visor was useless, covered in ice and static. She pulled it up, exposing her face to the biting wind. The cold was immediate and brutal, but her eyes could see what her instruments couldn't, the faint shimmer of movement in the crystal trees. Another chirp. Closer now. "That's it, Sivran," she called out, though she knew he couldn't understand her words. The Galactic Council had expressed concern when humanity first applied for membership. They'd reviewed Earth's history, the wars, the environmental destruction, the tribalism. Too aggressive, some species argued. Too primitive. Others worried humans would spread their conflicts across the stars. But Ambassador Chen had stood before the council and said something that made them reconsider. "We carry our dead home. We walk into fires to save strangers. We are stubborn, yes, perhaps foolishly so, but we do not leave our own behind." Marin stumbled, her boot catching on a crystallized root. She fell hard, her suit's integrity alarm blaring. A crack had formed along her left leg seal. Not critical yet, but in these temperatures, it would be soon. She forced herself up. Ahead, through the storm's fury, she saw a cluster of crystal formations, a natural shelter. And there, huddled in the alcove, 3 small shapes with dimly glowing fur. They'd found each other. The cubs, separated by the storm, had somehow reunited. Marin crawled the last few meters, her leg wound bleeding warmth into the frozen air. She reached the shelter and pulled herself inside. immediately wrapping her arms around the trembling cubs. Sivran chirped frantically, pressing his tiny body against her chest. Terrell and Kosha joined him. Their combined warmth, a small comfort against the cold. Her suit's medical system injected emergency stimulants. Her comm crackled, still no signal, but the interference was lessening. The storm was passing. "We're going to make it," she told them, her voice hoarse. "Just hold on." Hours passed. Marin stayed conscious through sheer will, talking to the cubs in soft tones, sharing body heat, monitoring her vital signs as they fluctuated. The storm gradually weakened, its fury spent. When the rescue team finally found them at dawn, Marin was hypothermic and delirious, but alive. The cubs were nestled safely in her arms, their luminescent patterns pulsing in what the xenobiologists would later identify as a gratitude display. Dr. Zareth, the Archon team leader, helped load Marin onto the medical transport. He said, his synthesized voice tinged with something like admiration. "When your lantern failed, probability of survival was 3.7%. Marin smiled weakly. "Someone forgot to tell the cubs that." "No," Zareth corrected, his optical sensors focusing on her. "Someone forgot to tell you." The story spread through the research station, then across the colonial network, and eventually to the Galactic Council itself. Not as a tale of human exceptionalism, but as a reminder of something the other species had perhaps forgotten in their technological advancement. Sometimes the most important capability wasn't strength or speed or intelligence. Sometimes it was simply the stubborn refusal to give up. Sivran recovered fully, as did his companions. They stayed with Marin for the remainder of her assignment, bonding with her in ways the xenobiologists found unprecedented. When she finally left Cathara 9, the cubs performed a farewell ceremony. Their glowing patterns synchronized in a display that, translated, meant, "The one who walks through storms, the one who never abandons." Back on the transport, Marin looked at her official commendation, a simple line that read, "For extraordinary dedication to xenobiological conservation." She smiled and set it aside. The cubs would have said it better,